My name is Laura Nyirinkindi. I'm a Ugandan-based human rights lawyer, gender activist. I have been working on combating violence against women in Africa for the last 10 years and in providing meaningful access to justice remedies for victims. Why does gender-based violence remain such a big problem in Africa? I see two major causes for this phenomenon. One is the negative, harmful practices that are prevalent under culture, that are widely accepted. They're embedded in everyday life, and people have become normalized to these incidences, and they don't recognize them for what they are: insidious forms of violence against women, against girls. The second one is the unequal power relations that women hold in society. These are not because of their physical or biological status, but it's because of the status that they're given under societal practices, belief, and under culture, sometimes religion. So how can we address some of these negative stereotypes and taboos that are deeply ingrained and major factors for violence against women in Africa? Well, we have to confront these vices for what they are and not accept them as part of the ordinary way of life. We have to call them out for what they are: violations of women's rights and crimes. So one of the best ways to do this is to, first of all, put in place the appropriate legal frameworks that criminalize such behavior. But that doesn't always put an end to violence, because it can lead to non-reporting among the victims if they think that they'll face backlash and stigma from the communities in which they live for reporting these incidences, because many communities are surrounded by cultures of silence and impunity. So educating both the victims and the communities on the issues, that is, that they need to respect human rights of men and women alike, that they need to behave in a manner that fosters peace and stability in the community and exercise their rights responsibly, and make sure that peace is promoted in communities. We need to inculcate a culture of discussion and debate around these issues and break the culture of silence. We need to destigmatize the victims and see them for who they really are: survivors. We need discourses that promote new cultures and subcultures of respect for rights of women in Africa. What best practices have emerged from the APRM regarding prevention of violence against women? The major one that comes to mind is the adoption of appropriate legal frameworks. Many countries have adopted laws, criminal laws, that sanction domestic violence, for example, marital rape in some countries, although there are quite a few countries that do not accept marital rape as a criminal offense, but reforms take time, so we believe that this will change. Sexual harassment in public and private spaces, educational institutions, and the workplace has been criminalized in many countries, and rape and defilement of young girls. All these are manifestations of laws that actually can protect women and girls from the vice of violence, and it will take a multidimensional effort from the law enforcement agencies and institutions to work together with society to change these norms, using both positive community liaison methods of education, but also sanctions. Countries like Uganda have developed laws on domestic violence, and many other African countries. Zambia has been progressive in having a law that is wider than domestic violence. It's called the Anti-Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Act. So it looks at various forms of violence, whether in the economic sector, physical violence, psychological violence, and other forms of abuse against women. So these are good examples of countries looking beyond cultural practices, rejecting norms and attitudes that perpetuate violence against women, and choosing to act on it. Another good practice that has been noted, for example, in South Africa, is the adoption of victim-centered approaches. Because criminal law traditionally looks at the perpetrator and leaves the victim sometimes abandoned. And in terms of real justice, the victims feel that they have gained nothing out of their suffering. So South Africa has been very forward-looking in that regard and has built units in police stations to address these issues. They've also adopted strong psychosocial support mechanisms And they have increased prevention mechanisms, working with the police in the communities for stronger surveillance and stronger community liaison efforts that result in violence being apprehended right at the place where it occurs, rather than just treating symptoms when it's too late, when actual harm has happened. And these are just a few examples of good practices. What still needs to happen to reduce the high levels of gender-based violence in Africa? There is room for improvement in the way institutions are organized and capacitated to address the issue of violence against women. Most police agencies, judiciaries, social workers are overburdened. They're under-resourced. They're overwhelmed with the magnitude of the problem, and they're not equipped with the right skills all the time to handle some of the forms. Some forms are really extremely disturbing and call for prolonged interventions rather than just quick fixes. So it is important to strengthen these mechanisms, to capacitate them to give the appropriate responses. Women feel often that the justice mechanisms are not responsive to their concerns, to their plight. And when this happens, it leads to underreporting, and which worsens the situation. So in order for access to justice to become real for these victims, the judicial systems, the police, and all other actors in the criminal justice delivery system, as well as social welfare and rehabilitation, needs to play a strong role to provide a multidisciplinary response to the plight of violence against women in Africa.